Hey there, folks. Long time no see. I had a random idea with the PS3. Yeah, PS3, Vita, PSP, like the old PlayStation Network store closing. I had the idea that it would be fun to go back and revisit one of my favorite games. So I'm going to play through all of the Ratchet Clank games. I'm separating this out into two videos. So my first thought was to actually just do a full retrospective, like probably at least an hour long, of like all the games. But I figured why make one long video when I can make two shorter videos, since I haven't put out a lot lately, especially. So I'm going to start with the PS2 era and just cover those here. And then I'm going to follow that up with the PS3 era, which is the Ratchet & Clank Future games, and Into the Nexus, which I believe is a mainline. I'm doing this all pretty much unscripted because I just don't really want to write a script or anything. So I hope it sounds okay, but my plan is to basically do kind of first impressions on each game, and then like final thoughts. So expect time to pass. I've been, growing out my quarantine beard. Maybe it'll get longer. Who knows? You can't really tell on camera, actually. It looks a lot smaller than it is. But anyway, like it's going to be over the span of weeks, months. I don't know how long it's going to take to beat these games. But I thought that would be fun instead of like, playing each game, like writing a script section and then doing it all in post. I kind of want to give you my thoughts as I go. So we're gonna do kind of a time-lapse thing of like each game in order. So yeah, aside from just the store closing making me want to do this, also we do have, a new game coming out, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and it's baffling to me that like this whole generation of Ratchet & Clank games is kind of stuck on the PS3. Because obviously it started on the PS2, but they put the collection out on PS3, which is just an HD compilation of those first three games. And then there's the PS3 exclusive games that haven't been put anywhere else. I think you can play them through PS Now on the PS4. But like, I have my shiny new PS5, can't play any of them. And there's a new game in the series coming out this year. Really, the only one you can still play, like, on current systems is the Ratchet & Clank, like, Origin reboot thing, which isn't technically canon. It was based on a movie that failed, and so they haven't really done anything else with it. Supposedly, the new game, Rift Apart, is going to pick up the story from where Into the Nexus left off, completely ignoring the reboot. So it's going to be interesting. But what I'm really excited about is to kind of, like, I remember the first game not being amazing. I never played it growing up or anything. I started with Going Commando. So I'm really excited to jump back into that one and really like compare it to its PS4 reboot, and kind of see how they, took that same story and like modernized the gameplay stuff, but also give it that, that first game treatment. The way that a lot of first games are. Like if you look at, the original Mega Man game or the original Donkey Kong Country, like they set the foundation, but they're usually not amazing games. They get people in, and then the sequel is really where the series establishes itself. So yeah, I am excited to jump into this first game, and I will let you know soon what my thoughts are. So yeah, without further ado, I don't want this to be too long. I'm going to play the first game and jump into some thoughts and impressions. Okay, so I've played about an hour or so of the first game. Controller for prop. I don't know, I should probably put this down. I was still holding it, my bad. And it's weird. Like, this game is a solid foundation. And, I mean, if this was the only one we had, I would love it. Like, I mean, obviously, like I said, I started with Going Commando, but I loved it. Like, it blew my mind as a kid. I say a kid, I think it came out in, like, 2002 or something. I don't know. I mean, comparatively, I was a kid, I guess. That was like 13? I think I was like 13 or 14 when I played it. Anyway, but for me, like as a 32-year-old, it's weird because this is very similar to the PS4 reboot. And I recently played through that again through the backwards compatibility, like PlayStation Plus collection on PS5. I played through it twice actually because I was trying to get the platinum. And that friggin' Groovatron trophy. Couldn't get it. So I really don't want to play through it a third time just to get that. But I did 100% complete the game through like New Game Plus and all that. So this is all very familiar to me. And here it feels like just kind of a more like sparse, generic, almost boring version of that game. And again, I'm trying not to like have that be a negative towards this game because obviously the new one didn't exist yet. And everything that like you know about Ratchet and Clank came from this. I mean, the, you know, kind of the single player like dual gameplay of Ratchet and Clank, like the, you know, their separate abilities, the different like wacky weapons you get and stuff like that. The, you know, run and gun, like platforming and using, you know, your gadgets to manipulate the environment and like all of that is present here, but it also just feels kind of safe. Like I said, the environments are very sparse. Like it's, I mean, obviously it's a PS2 game, you know, versus the again, the reboot is PS4. They added a lot more like depth to it and everything like that, even though they made the story a total mess, and this one's a lot more simple so far. Like, it's just Ratchet and Clank trying to find Captain Quark for whatever reason. I don't know yet. And then President, whoever, like Drek, I think he might be some kind of like leading commander type guy, is destroying planets again for some reason. I'm only an hour in. I know it's not a super long game, but there's more to it than, you know, what I've seen so far. All very simple. But when you're walking around the environments, like, there's a few spattering of enemies, pretty flat landscapes, and a few platforming sections. And the actual gameplay is fairly samey. So far, at least, I haven't had, like, a solo Clank mission. I don't know if those are even a thing in this one. There's been no, like, ship combat missions, which I'm almost certain there aren't any. I think the problem is that there's not enough, like, diversity here to justify the samey gameplay. So, for example, in future games, you can, like, upgrade your weapons, and there's a whole, like, upgrade tree of, like, things you can, you know, add to them. As you use them, they, like, level up and get stronger, that kind of thing. Again, so far, none of that is in here. You do get different weapons, like you go to the Gadgetron vendor and you buy a different weapon. It seems to be about one per planet. But they don't, like, get stronger or anything. So there's not a lot of incentive to, you know, swap them out. Because in the other games, it's like you want to upgrade all your weapons. So it's like once you get one to, you know, whatever the max level is, you switch over because there's not much point in using that one when it's all the way leveled up and you have others that aren't. Here, they're all pretty equal. Like, I mean, I have the, you start with like the bomb thing, whatever, I don't remember what it's called. And then you get the Pyrocider, which is like a flamethrower, and then the, I have the game pulled up, what's it called? Blaster. And, I mean, the blaster is just pretty much a machine gun. So, I mean, they have different uses, but they're all pretty interchangeable. Like, they're very safe weapons so far. Basically, like, this so far, this game is about what I expected. It is, you know, it is a foundation of the series, but it's very basic. And a lot of that's on the presentation side. Like, the map and kind of the menus in general look very bland. It's not very easy to navigate around and everything. You don't have a very nice, like, inventory wheel. I got the slingshot, I think it's called. Swing shot, whatever. that is in pretty much every game, but it's like it's on your weapon wheel instead of being just like a context-sensitive thing. In general, so far this game kind of just feels like, you know, the Ratchet and Clank series as a whole, but kind of slower and chunkier and a little more repetitive. Like, I can totally understand why this series got big. Like, it's a very strong foundation for the rest of the series, but it's kind of hard to get through now. It kind of just makes me want to replay the PS4 version instead, because gameplay-wise, like, you know, as far as the worlds you visit and the people you interact with and all that, like, it's basically the same. So yeah, I am curious to see where this one goes and if I like it more by the end. Like, you know, if there's more mission variety and stuff. But, like, first impression, you know, I wanted to share, like, my first hour or so. A little boring. And just real quick before I jump back into the game and, you know, run through to get my final impressions, I forgot to mention up top, I'm just doing mainline games here. So we're not doing any of the, like, spin-off titles like Deadlocked, All for One. There's another one I can't remember right now. I'll put it on screen. And then I'm also not doing the PSP Size Matters because I tried it again recently and it's rough. Like the fact that the PSP doesn't have 2 sticks, and I think it only has 2 shoulder buttons too. Anyway, the controls in that game are bad. Like in this one, they're kind of funky because like there's no strafe, which sometimes can make the aiming of weapons and things like that not very fun. And just like the camera gets in your way a lot more than it does in the other games, I feel like. But like it's still way better than the PSP controls, so I'm not doing that one. But yeah, anyway, that's my first impressions on the first game. I will see you soon with my final thoughts on this one. Well, like, editing-wise, I'll see you soon. It's probably going to be a few hours of playing for me, but that's how this works. Editing magic. I'm done. I'm gonna try to finish the game, but if I can't, I wanted to go ahead and give my final thoughts on it. As far as this experiment is concerned, I'm done with the game. So I don't want this to sound too salty, but this first game is prohibitively unfun. Let's say that. It has everything I enjoy about the Ratchet and Clank series in it. I hesitate to say that it's a bad game, because it's not, by any means. But as like kind of a first, feet in the water entry, it has enough problems in it that I don't actively enjoy playing it. I feel like I'm doing it just because I said I was going to, play through and beat all of these games, not because I actually want to. And I don't want this to not be a fun experiment. Don't want this to not. It's double negative. You know what I mean. It's whatever. This is why I write scripts. But the problem is everything about the controls and the structure hinder the fun of the game. So, I've already said before, like, it has, you know, the different weapons and the platforming, and I did have one Clank section and one hoverboard section and things like that so far. But there's a lot of problems with it too. And it's possible this is going to move on into the other PS2 era games. I don't remember them as well. This one, so basically I'm only like detailing the problems I have with this one. If those problems continue, bummer. But I know some things are fixed. So the main thing is the controls. The lack of strafing just destroys a lot of the enjoyment in this game. Because you go around in circles and try to aim, but half the time you get hit before you can actually hit them, just because of the act of simply moving around and aiming your shot. Like, it's not fun. And you can only aim, like, you know, actual first-person aim when you're standing still. So it's a whole combination of unfun things. And between deaths, so, like, you know, you go through, you break boxes and all that. If you die, you go back to the last Gadgetron, which is basically your checkpoint. And those are spread pretty far apart. Like, I don't remember the checkpoints being that far apart in any other of the games. And all of the boxes and stuff you've broken stay gone. So there's very little in the way of, like, ammo refills and stuff like that. And like I said, there's no upgrade system or anything, so, like, basically the only ammo you have is the amount that you purchase at the Gadgetron and occasional ammo boxes. Not a lot. Same with health. There's no health grade upgrades or anything. So you have 4 health bars, and it seems like every enemy takes a full one. Like, there's no quarter hits or anything like that. So you have 4 hits to get through each section. Which, again, it wouldn't normally be a problem. Like, I'm not expecting, you know, a baby game for babies where, like, it's just super easy. But when the controls and the enemies, like enemy placement, I should say, get in the way of your platforming, that's not a lot of life. So if they had implemented some kind of system, like I think the future games do, if they implemented some kind of system where you get more health over time, that, you know, helps to mediate some of those control issues, fine. Or, like, if your guns get stronger as you go, and so you don't need to use as much ammo to take out the enemies, fine. Or, if the controls were better, so that, you know, you could go on less health, still fine. But all of those things together make it just unfun to navigate these levels for the most part. And that sucks, because I love this game. But again, I said this before, everything about it makes me just kind of want to play the PS4 version instead. Because all the things I love in this game are also in that one, but it fixes all the things I hate. There's some cool stuff, like some cool stuff in this game that isn't in that one. But not enough to justify the jank in this one. For example, I said there was one hoverboard section. It just starts. Like, you hit a button to do the hoverboard race, and then it just goes. Like, I'm not editing this footage. It's so jarring. They don't tell you controls. There's no 3, 2, 1, go. Nothing. You just have to figure it out. That's basically how this whole game works. It's like, they forgot to tutorial anything. So, like, there's a lot of just context issues missing in this game. Like, if you go to a spot where you're supposed to use the swing shot and you don't have the swing shot equipped, you just die. Like, you'd think the game would, you know, let you hit the button anyway, but no. Just if you have a weapon equipped instead, you just shoot while dying. And all these things can be chalked up to first game syndrome. So, like, I'm trying not to be too hard on it, but, like, all of those flaws are the things that are preventing me from wanting to beat this game. Part of it is the mental fact of, like, I'm, you know, judging this game with 2021 knowledge of it gets better. But also, I'm doing a retrospective on the entire series. And retrospective specifically means, going into a retro game with modern sensibilities. So I am going to judge it based on now. And also, I don't want to spend a bunch of time on this game I'm not enjoying when I'm covering the whole series. I don't want to get burnout on the first one, you know what I mean? So I'm going to move on, because I know that a lot of my issues are fixed in the next one. And so there's no point in harping on a bunch of things that, is not going to be true, in the next games in the series that I'm still going to cover. So for now, I'm just going to say that this game is a little rough to go back to, and it's a shame, because I can see all of the little sparks of the series I love. They're not fleshed out yet. There's a bunch of eggs that just haven't hatched. So yeah, hopefully the next game has strafing, weapon upgrades, life upgrades, a few of those other things, and feels a little bit less, thrown together. Because it was 2 or 3 hours in before I did a Clank mission, and it was kind of sad. It wasn't a great Clank mission. I did forget how much I don't like the PS2 Clank missions, because they're all pretty much the same. They add a few things here and there, but it all kind of boils down to, you wander around and you control these little microbots, but it's super clunky. But yeah, the hover race is when I kind of, I think a flip switched in my head, and I was like, all right, this is not the game that I thought it was. Because that was just so janky. The way it just drops you in. That was definitely an eye-opener for me. And it's when I kind of started to think that I was reaching my end point. And then yeah, this whole last section of the problem is you use all of your ammo trying to get to the next point, and then you die and get respawned back to the last checkpoint, but you don't get respawned with your ammo again. But all the enemies are back and everything. So you spend all of your time trying to get there, use all your ammo, and then die before the next checkpoint, but respawn with all of that stuff you have to do again without the benefit of more boxes and ammo and things like that. So you just go back to the Gadgetron vendor, refill all your guns with ammo, just to do that same section again, waste all that ammo again, and still possibly die enough to do it. It starts to get repetitive, and I don't care anymore. Especially when you die on something stupid and have to do it all again. You can say that, checkpoints are for babies, just suck it up and do it again, you did it once already. But at a certain point, it's isn't that just padding? Why do I have to keep redoing that same section over and over again that I already know how to do, just to see the next part? The point of checkpoints is a convenience, so you don't have to keep redoing the same sections over and over again. That's my point. That's my checkpoint, if you will. So yeah, I'm done with this one. Let's move on to the next game. Going Commando. Let's do this. Now this is more like it. I know I was maybe unnecessarily hard on the first game. I think it was justified, but, I'm open to opinions. This is the game where I feel like they nailed the presentation of the series. Or started to, at least. There's still weird things like the gadgets are part of your quick select wheel rather than just being context things. But I'm pretty sure that continues for a while. But yeah, the weapon selection here is way better. Even the early weapons you have, they're more fun to play with. I love the what's it called? The saw blade thing. I don't remember what it's called, but it's great. And it's the little things that they fixed. Like, you get more health as you go. You can upgrade your weapons as you go. You can strafe. Like, the camera's still kind of finicky a little bit. I mean, it's PS2. A lot of games had bad cameras in that generation. But it's the fact that you can hold a button and strafe. Like, it's unbelievable how much different it makes the game when you can back up without losing sight of your enemies. I'm gonna have a lot more thoughts, I think, after I finish this one. But, initial impressions, I'm just glad that pretty much every complaint I had about the first game, they addressed here. Even, more frequent checkpoints. It's not just Gadgetron vendors. It'll pop up with continue point or something. I think that's what they call it. Also, something I kind of forgot about, they still fixed. The first game, like, I didn't register at first that Ratchet was a different voice actor. I noticed that he kind of had like a raspy, like he needed to clear his throat or something.
So I agree to take you to this wherever it is, and you get my ship started for me?
That is what I'm proposing.
But he sounded similar enough that I just didn't think about it. But it's so great to have James Arnold Taylor, is that his name? It's those three words in some combination. It's so great to have him officially as Ratchet. Like, he brings just a warmth and humor to the character that I don't think the first game had. There was some of it, but it's just, I don't know, something about that raspy voice just didn't seem right.
Well, as you can imagine, we've been pretty busy. After Drek's defeat, there were parades, press conferences, fancy dress balls.
And the wiener roast at Al's.
Oh yeah, that. And then things started to slow down a bit. After that,
There was the grand opening at Groovy Lube.
Right. I think that was last week.
6 months ago.
We're still pretty busy, but in a more, domestic sense.
Yesterday, I flushed out my radiator core.
I guess no one needs a hero right now.
This game, I like that it kind of plays off like Ratchet and Clank are heroes, and like they're just chilling in the meantime, and like, doing interviews, and I don't know. I enjoy the celebrity aspect of it, and I think it's fun how they can play that up. Like I said, I'm still early on. We'll see where it goes from here. But yeah, first thoughts. Feels like coming home. This is my Ratchet and Clank. So it's been about a week since I recorded the first impressions on this game, because it was longer than I thought it was going to be. I did not do everything, full disclosure. I mean, I beat the game, but I didn't get all of the weapons. I didn't upgrade all of the weapons. I wasn't going for 100% completion. But even just like the progression of the game took me, I want to say, like probably 15 hours. And I don't want to repeat anything that I said in my first impressions, because all of that stayed true throughout, as far as like more weapon diversity and the better controls and that kind of stuff. But that means that this final impression is going to be a little bit more negative, because as I went, I saw more of the problems with the game. So up front, I want to start with some pros. And I mean, the amount of things there are to do in the game was staggering, for better or worse. But again, I'll get to that in a little bit. Not only are there, improved versions of things that there were in the first game, like the race sections, and actually has like, proper like directions at the beginning before the race starts. But there's also the ship dogfight missions, which I thought were in the first one. They might have been, but I never got to one. They're terrible, but they're there. And then one of my favorite things, I think, was like you transform Clank into this like big mech thing and like go around on kind of a sphere. I assume it's supposed to be a planet, but I mean the scale is extreme. Maybe like a Mario Galaxy like planetoid, you know? But yeah, you like use giant mech Clank and you just like beat up bad guys, which is really cool, and you're like destroying buildings, and yeah, that was pretty hype. So in general, like there's so much variety of things. Also, you know, of course, like the combat challenges and things I mentioned already, that it never really feels repetitive like the first game did. Some of the stuff still overstays its welcome by the end, like when, you know, those sections come back and they're arguably not as good, or are never good, like the ship sections, but they keep coming back anyway. But it's still nice to at least have the diversity to kind of mix up the gameplay. I still have problems with the way the gadget wheel works, because they're just, you only have one wheel for your weapons, whereas like in later games, you know, they added a toggle so you could like have like sub screens to your weapon wheel and stuff, or your quick select wheel. This one, you have, I think, like 5 or 6 gadgets that you collect through the game, and you either have to go into the start menu, select gadgets, and then equip the gadget every time you want to use it, or just put it on your weapon wheel and it's just kind of taking up a slot because you don't use the gadgets that often. But the ones we do have here are pretty cool, somewhat hit or miss. Like, I never really enjoyed using the tractor beam or whatever it's called. It was pretty basic. There's a few interesting puzzles with it, but they never feel as good to control as, like, you know, just pushing the block by hand. I mean, that seems like an obvious function. But then there's some really cool ones, like the Terminator. I don't remember what it's called. These things have weird names, but it changes the temperature of water, basically. So like it turns ice into water and vice versa. And they do some cool platforming sections with that every now and then. And then the Dynamo was another one that was kind of hit or miss, but it had some interesting uses. Like, there were some sections where even like you kind of go into a side scroller view, and you're just kind of making platforms as you go using that, and it was pretty cool. But my favorite ones were the gadgets that like auto activated. So like there'd be different kind of pads that you step on, and like, you know, you might gain the power of flight. Or there's another one that was like a glider, which kind of felt a little too similar, but like had its own purpose because you could pretty much only kind of go, you know, with the wind. Whereas the jetpack, I guess, with Clank was, you know, more vertical. But some of their uses were kind of interchangeable, and, you know, it felt like they maybe could have tightened that up a little bit. But they were still fun to use. They mixed things up. There was some cool sections with them. It was a nice way to break up the pace of the game. Like I mentioned, the worlds themselves are also a lot more interesting and varied. When, like, each time you land on one, it's like, oh, this is really cool looking. Like, there's, you know, the ice planet and the desert planet and, like, the kind of the metropolis and, like, kind of more of, like, a lava planet. And so it allowed them to kind of mix things up in a way, because you could have things like, you know, rising lava sections in one world. And then you could have, like I mentioned, you know, the freezing water sections in another world. There was also it seemed like a lot more weapons, because it includes, as far as I know, all of the weapons from the first game. And if you had a save file from the first game, you could buy those weapons for free, which I thought was a really nice touch. So there's some really cool ones. Like, I loved the Tesla coil. I never got to that one in the first game, so I was really pleased with that one. It's kind of a close range, like a radius effect, like, because it kind of like it arcs between enemies as it hits them. The one bummer is those weapons weren't given upgrades like the other weapons, like the new weapons were. So they only have one stage to them. So, I mean, when there's already so many new weapons that can be, you know, upgraded to better versions, there's not a lot of reason to go back to those old ones. But also, like I said, there's a lot of combat in the game. So, I mean, it helps just to have, you know, a backup option. Like, if you run out of ammo with everything else, you can swap out to those and still at least keep going. But just functionally, they are a lot different too. So there's some that you can actually have activated all at the same time. So all of those things at once can get pretty chaotic and can really help with some of the crowd control that can be pretty extreme in this game. Like, waves of enemies just kind of keep coming, especially in the combat arenas. But the game also can't always handle that. Even just the amount of enemies on screen at a time can cause the game to chug a little bit. And then when you get, some of these more effect-heavy weapons on screen, like there's like kind of a cluster bomb one. And whenever I used that, it just the whole game took a dump. And again, I know that should be in the cons, but it's related to this section, so I thought I'd mention it real quick. They might have been a little too ambitious, but like one section I remember specifically as far as like how visually interesting this game can get was in one of the Metropolis worlds. Again, couldn't tell you the name. And it's a really cool grind boot section where you're like jumping from like teleporting bus to teleporting bus. And it's really cool. I don't know. It's one of those things that's like hard to explain outside of just showing it to you. So I'm kind of just like vamping to give more time to show the footage over what I'm talking about. But it's definitely one of the more memorable sections. And like, I feel like was just very impressive for the PS2. So yeah, I definitely remember that part. And then there's a few, I think in this same world, it was one of the cooler worlds. I just don't remember the name, where like people are running out of their houses being chased by the little proto-pet guys, which are a major part of the story. But the story's not a pro, so I'll get to that in a second. And that was really cool too, because like outside of just the chaos of like fighting enemies while these guys are chasing the citizens and stuff, it's just kind of it's very visually interesting. I don't know how else to say it. But yeah, the whole presentation on hand here is a lot more polished, cinematic. So I definitely noticed that they put the money in for the sequel for sure. But unfortunately, getting into some of the cons now, where the presentation does take a hit is in the actual story. I know I mentioned with the first impressions that I kind of liked, the hero angle of it. But that's about where the enjoyable moments end with the story. I kind of kept expecting it to get like bigger. Like they introduced this proto-pet thing, and you're like basically going planet to planet chasing Professor Fizzwidget or whatever, because he wants you to go find the proto-pet and deliver it to him, and then you do that and find out that the proto-pet's actually like evil, which is when it starts attacking all the citizens and stuff on that planet. And so you're trying to get it back from him to stop what you just started, basically. And it never really evolves past that. You just kind of keep chasing Professor Fizzwidget. I'm getting full spoilers here. I feel like you should expect that by now. The final battle is just against a giant evil proto-pet and isn't even that interesting. Like, it kind of feels like a bullet sponge. And then it's pretty much just credits. Like, there's a few twists where, like, the evil robed creature that you think is the main bad guy ends up being not only good, but a woman, and whatever, or Lombax, the same race as Ratchet. And so it's like, oh, that's cool. They don't really do anything with her. And there's also like a last minute plot twist that Professor Fizzwidget was Quark the whole time, and he wanted to unleash this chaos so he could save the day. There's nuggets there of like something cool. I feel like you spend so much time just chasing this story, world to world, that they never really get to actually tell it. And then by the time it starts to get interesting, you have a boss fight and then it ends. And like there's some post-credit stuff during the credits, but wait, I guess it's not post-credits if it's during the credits. You know what I mean. There's some scenes during the credits, but they don't really amount to much either. Quark gets like arrested or whatever, and you find out the real Professor Fizzwidget. Sorry, I didn't mean to demote him. I know he went to school for a very long time to get his title, whatever. Was there the whole time, and like, I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be some cool setup for the next game to pay off, but we're not there yet. So as far as this game's story goes, it's pretty lame. They kind of just tried to pull a Baby Yoda 20 years too early, and it did not work. The proto-pet isn't even that interesting.
Introducing the Megacore Protopet. Your child will shriek with joy when he meets our adorable friend. Want to play ball? So does the Protopet. Need a partner for tag? Go find the Protopet. Up for some cops and robbers? Help! Police! So is you-know-who. Just ask Billy.
But yeah, the whole thing feels like undercooked and underwhelming. And the lackluster final fight is definitely an issue. Final bite, because it's a giant mouth. Whatever. I was going to cut that, but now I have to keep it in. Aside from that, like, the pacing of the story is a problem, but also the pacing of the game can still be a problem too. They've gotten better with adding in checkpoints outside of just, the Gadgetron vendor spots, but there's still parts where you go long sections of, like, multiple obnoxious combat rooms without any reprieve. So you basically run out of ammo by the time you get to the next spot, and you might die before you get there. Like, there was one point when I died from a stupid, just like, missed jump, and found out when I finally got through it that it was a room before the checkpoint. And it's like, come on, I had to do all that again just to move 5 feet and get the checkpoint notification. Like, that kind of stuff is why the lack of checkpoints annoys me. So yeah, that problem is still there. They didn't really do anything to mediate it. Aside from, like, early on, at least, there's more cutscenes, and those sections are shorter. But by the end, it's still just frustrating combat gauntlet after combat gauntlet. And you might die on a cheap jump that you didn't realize. Yeah, I kind of mentioned this before, but the variety of gameplay missions isn't always a good thing. Like I said, those ship missions are terrible, but they also require you to do them. Like, a few of the planets are just ship missions. I feel like they could have cut those entirely and nothing would have been lost, and there would have been less worlds to go to. And there's one boss section, which happens after one of those super long gauntlets of combat encounters. You basically have to, like, infiltrate into the middle of this city. And then there's a boss fight that's literally just shooting from a turret, and then the boss comes over and destroys your turret, and you go to the next turret. Repeat. It's very boring. Just feels like a bullet sponge. I'm sure there's other ways you can do it, like using your actual weapons and stuff, but why would you when ammo's limited and the turrets aren't? So yeah, it's a lot of just holding a button and slightly aiming around to destroy the missiles that he shoots at you before going back to pointing your turret at him. And if you die at any point on it, like, he could be a sliver away. If you die, kicks you back. Luckily, all of the enemies are gone from the most of the enemies are gone from the gauntlet. And so you just have to make that annoyingly long trek back to the boss to do it again. But you have to do the entire boss again. They could at least, like, spawn you back at the boss. Like, that would mediate some of the frustration. But yeah, that one sucks. I can't think of any good boss fights outside of, like, the fun Clank mech. The variety of missions sometimes just feel like padding, and are, I feel like this is my phrase of the retrospective, actively unfun to do, but at least there is variety. Like, it's not just, samey gameplay with weapons that don't upgrade and, no health increases or whatever. I actually got quite a bit of health by the end. It's just enemies also get stronger, so you still end up dumping way too much ammo into them, which is why I started focusing on that shield weapon, because I at least didn't have to worry as much about getting hit. You also get, like, armor upgrades as you go, but they're stupid expensive, so I kind of was focusing more on weapons than armor. So I'm sure it gets easier if you have the, beefier armor, but I still just kind of got tired of fighting things by the end. I wanted more of that variety. Yeah, there's also some of the worlds that just aren't terribly interesting. Like, the desert planet has you doing a section where you just have to farm out these crystals in order to get your ship repaired. And so it's just enemies pop up, you shoot at them, you take them out, you knock out a crystal thing, get it, and just go and go and go. There's also an ice planet that is basically the same thing. except the enemies are way more annoying. They're these giant Yeti things, and it's like 3 or 4 spawn at once, and they're obnoxiously tough. And even if you take them out and die and go back, they respawn. They just pop up again. So it basically got to the point where I didn't even bother fighting them. Like, I would just dash past everything to take out a few of the crystals at a time, take the hits, whatever, don't care, didn't want to spend the money on more ammo or anything, and just kind of grinded it out, like, through the deaths, just a few crystals at a time, because it wasn't fun. Like, you get more money from the crystals than you do from the enemies, so it was worth it just to die after getting a few crystals at a time. And on the note of repetitive things that are actively unfun, door lock minigames are back, but instead of the kind of slow, clunky infiltrator thing that they had in the first game, it's like kind of a timed, like, movement thing where you just kind of fail until you succeed. So it's quick to do multiple tries, but it just feels unnecessary. Like, they're not fun minigames, they're just quick. They even bring back the infiltrator, but it's a new minigame that arguably is worse. Because the controls on it are bad, and you're like going around this sphere. I think it's just they wanted to show off that they could make a nice looking 3D sphere, but it's still not good. Last but not least, I do want to kind of circle back to the amount of worlds there are. At one point, I just kind of did like a footage thing of like going down them all because I thought I was almost to the end, and I wasn't. So like I show off like 20 planets or something like that, and I was maybe 3/4 of the way done. So there's still more from what I show. Yeah, the interface of it, like just being a list of planets, makes it really hard to remember what you need to go back for, because you have to basically click on each planet to see the actual missions on it. It would have been nice, like, if you totally complete one, if it had like a little, asterisk or something on it that says, hey, you've done everything there is to do on this planet. That's the smallest presentation thing they could have done to fix that problem. But they also could have just had fewer worlds, because some of them are unnecessary. Like I said, some of them are only ship missions, which are terrible. And one of them is literally just a pit stop to get ship upgrades. Which, if they had gotten rid of the ship missions, they could have also gotten rid of that planet. But they also could have just put that planet somewhere else and had it be a quick teleport. Already, like, the hoverboard races are part of the planets. The combat missions are part of the planets. So, like, why did they need some planets that were just one thing? Feels kind of weird. So, yeah, there's still just kind of some mess I feel like they could tighten up in the game. Growing up, I probably wouldn't have minded how long the game took, because, I mean, I was a kid and couldn't afford a lot of games. So, like, give me all of it. But, like, again, I didn't do everything. Like, just basically beating the game took me about 15 hours. So, I mean, there's plenty of side content that you can grind out if you really want more time in the game. I'm kind of trying to rush through these a little bit for the sake of reviewing them, so I'm not going to be a completionist or anything. But I felt like some of the repetitive sections overstayed their welcome. I did read up a little bit, and I saw that the next game, they got rid of the ship missions, so that's good. Maybe y'all enjoy it more. But, again, the things even just you do within the planet, like as far as like the grind boots, they brought in like the magnetic boots or whatever they're called, for like anti-grav sections, which are really cool. And a lot of the platforming puzzles are all very solid and made this game infinitely more fun to play than the last one. But there's still just kind of an unnecessary amount of bloat in between those fun sections, to the point where like I spent way more time just grinding out combat gauntlets than I did any of those individual like puzzle rooms or anything. So like when I'm going back through the footage, I'll know what to put up on screen, but trying to think of specific examples, I don't know. All I remember is strafing side to side shooting things. So yeah, I did not mean this to come off so negative. It's just everything I liked about the game I pretty much covered in the first impressions. So going into, my final thoughts on it, like, it's a lot of the things that by the end I was kind of soured on. and especially the story was kind of trash, I'll be honest. But I am excited to jump into the next one. I'm kind of hoping it won't take another week to complete because that's been a little overwhelming. But we'll see. You never know. For now, that's all I've got to say on this one. So, you know, I guess it's time to up our arsenal. I don't know. How do you end this when the video's not over? Like, it's weird. Let's move on to the next game. Do like a screen wipe or something. Make it fancy. I don't know why I'm saying this, as if I'm not going to do the editing. So, we are 3 games into this now. Finally, this retrospective, or at least this part of the retrospective, is almost over. And it's funny, because I don't really have a lot to say as far as first impressions without just repeating myself from past games. In a lot of ways, this is the most polished one yet. The presentation has taken a step up. You know, all of the obvious things of, like, the last part of a trilogy. I will say, what I find kind of funny is every time that I've complained about something in one of the past games, that stuff has basically been fixed in the next one. No surprise to me that my opinions are not unique. Clearly there are problems that get fixed, and other people have problems with too, but it is still interesting to know that, like, you know, not only do these games keep getting better, but also they, like, all of my cons and complaints keep getting solved. So that's really nice. They addressed the map interface. So I'm, you know, obviously not very far, but like when you go down the planets, it actually shows you like your next objective for that planet on the same screen, which is really nice. There's also been a bit of a fix with some of the weapon stuff. So you can not only like actually kind of quick toggle between your most recently equipped weapons, which can help when you're, you know, regularly switching back between like your main weapon and like the most recent gadget, when they, you know, kind of put combat challenges into some of these gadget puzzles. But you can also actually have like a secondary weapon screen, which for some reason I didn't think they implemented in this one. I thought it was later, but you know, pleasant surprise. I don't have enough weapons yet to need the second screen, but it is really nice to be able to have, you know, kind of 2 screens for your quick select. And also on the note of the weapons, they still can upgrade just like your health, but they actually have, I think it seems like 5 levels of upgrades, and basically like 2 through 4 are kind of like mods for them. So like, you know, more ammo, like a lock-on feature, some kind of like secondary like elemental upgrade, that kind of thing. So all that stuff is really cool. Like it makes the weapons feel more customizable. But yeah, so basically everything so far, at least like early game, that I've seen has been an improvement. The one thing that kind of bothers me though is the interface, like the HUD, because in the past games it was kind of like this, you know, very nice, like light blue. This one, like they changed all of the color stuff to this kind of like ugly, like yellowish gold that just stands out in kind of a harsh way, for one. And especially when it's like white on yellow, like sometimes the details can get kind of lost. But it seems like everything is bigger. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll do like a side-by-side comparison, but it seems like the HUD like takes up more space on screen. I really noticed it during like the battle challenges. But yeah, I'm not really a big fan of that kind of ugly yellow for everything. And then when you go to the weapon wheel, ironically, like that's less informative because it doesn't tell you like which weapons are out of ammo, whereas before, like, you know, when it was out, it would show like red or whatever, so you'd know that that one didn't have any ammo left. It also doesn't seem to have any kind of difference when your weapon is like max upgraded, because like I said, I got my starter weapon up to level 5, but on the weapon wheel, it doesn't look any different than the others. Whereas before, it was like, if it wasn't all the way upgraded, it was white. If it was all the way upgraded, it was like orange or something. So it's kind of weird they took some, like, they kind of did a step backwards as far as, like, the visual information on screen with that stuff. Yeah, so, like, some of the menus are better, some are worse. Kind of strange, but I do miss that nice blue color on everything. But one thing that's really cool, they've brought in these holo games, I think they're called, something like that, that are basically like playable Quark missions. And I remember them being really cool. That's the one thing I remember from this game, like when I played it as a kid, was these cool, like, unique Quark sections. And I mean, they're pretty goofy, like they're kind of jank to control and stuff, but I still love them. There are side-scrolling sections that are kind of more like platformer beat-em-ups. You get a few different weapons, and there's some basic, like, you know, wall jump, that kind of like platforming sections, falling platforms, all that. It's very simple stuff, but it's kind of charming in its own way. It's like I've always loved that kind of game within a game idea. So yeah, I'm excited to have more of those. I think there's like 7 total in the game or something like that. But yeah, it really does, like, it drops you into the action early, and then you pretty much very quickly get a lot of diverse gameplay stuff. I haven't visited very many planets yet, but there's been a nice diversity of not only like weapon types, but also like things to do so far. I will say you spend a little bit too much time going back to like your main ship or whatever, because for some reason this game has you like working for this Phoenix organization. So like you regularly go back to like the hub ship between planets and like get your next mission that way. And it really does slow things down because of the loading times and things like that. And just like this big ship hub takes a little while to navigate. So that's a little chunky, but I understand wanting kind of like a main story hub, because it already seems like this game is a little more story heavy. But the story still isn't much so far. You're like in the middle of this like galactic war, and they name drop Dr. Nefarious, who I know as kind of the main villain in Ratchet and Clank. So it's cool that he's making his first appearance here. And like you have to get Quark because he's like fought the guy before, and like there's this whole kind of, there's a lot of fun like world building stuff here of like establishing past character, like bringing back past characters that have already been established in the previous games. And you can definitely, it feels like, you know, 3 games in, this is finally like a lived in shared world, whereas I feel like the second game kind of just was its own weird thing. I'm going to stop it here because I want to play the game more and give my full thoughts. But for the most part, like, everything about this one is better. And that keeps happening. Let's hope that continues into the PS3 era, because I've heard those are a little hit or miss. But I don't remember them very well. So yeah, I'm excited to finish off this trilogy and let you know my full thoughts. But for now... And that's a wrap on the end of the Ratchet and Clank trilogy. Up Your Arsenal is interesting. I think for the most part it was the best of the 3, just as far as like being more, you know, more polished and that kind of thing. Like it was clearly a progression of quality, especially as far as the story is concerned, but I'll get to that. It's still not a perfect game though. So, yeah, a few things they did better that I pretty much already mentioned was like how they handle the weapons and the upgrades and things like that. There were also some more quality of life improvements with the gadgets. So one of my favorite things is that they combined the swing shot with I think the dynamo gadget, it was called in the second game, into one thing called the hyper shot. And it basically worked to manipulate anything green. So like, you know, you would use it to swing across gaps, or you would use it to like activate platforms and things like that the dynamo would do before. And it made for some really satisfying puzzle platforming sections where you'd have to toggle from like swinging to creating a platform and, you know, so on. So that kind of thing was really cool. They also brought back the magnet boots or whatever they're called, and there's some super cool, like, kind of, I don't want to call it anti-grav, because, like, I mean, you're obviously, you know, you're attached to a metal like floor, but, you know, it goes upside down and loops around, and like they do some really cool stuff with that one. Yeah, it was a lot more just like platforming and shooting in this one. There was still a really good variety, but it definitely felt like they kind of shifted focus a little bit from kind of the like variety platformer to more of the third-person shooter. Like, there's even a few sections where it was just like kind of an open landscape, and you had a few things you had to do in that landscape, and you had a radar that showed all the enemies, and it was basically just clear all of the enemies on this map type things. And there was also like a much larger like mission structure focus to it all. You know, you would go to a certain point on the planet, and then you'd basically get in this like troop vehicle and just go down the list of missions you have to do that are like, you know, tower defense or like kind of like land vehicles or turrets, a few different options. But it felt tonally a little weird to just like select these missions from a list and then, you know, clear them all out, especially when there were already other, you know, planets like the Annihilation Nation that had that same structure with like obstacle courses and, you know, battle royales and that kind of thing, like boss battles. To have that kind of stuff also just like thrown into the game at random points felt a little weird, and it happened a lot. You know, I complained in the last game about the amount of times you'd just be like going from room to room full of enemies to kill, and one would take you out and you'd have to do that whole section again. It cut out some of that because you're just doing a mission at a time. So if you lose, you know, you have to do that mission again, but it doesn't like kick you back to the last checkpoint or whatever. So when they split it up that way, it does kind of help. But, you know, knowing where the series went after this, like with Ratchet Deadlocked, that just like combat arena type gameplay, it definitely feels like they were kind of testing out some of those mechanics here of just like combat missions in a row. And I don't mind it. It's just, I didn't need that much of it. There was still some really good variety. I think there was some better Clank missions this time around. Still nothing super special, but it didn't rely as much on the just like, you know, grabbing gadget bots and having them kill enemies for you. Like the weird like monkey thing you get that you use to like distract enemies and things like that was kind of cool. It was a bit more of like a platforming focus. I, in general, I kind of liked the whole like Secret Agent Clank thing. Like, I'm not playing that game, but that spinoff takes place between 2 and 3. And so a lot of the like jokes and story of this game is based around like, you know, Ratchet being the washed up hero and Clank being like the superstar. And so like everywhere they go, they're like, "Oh, you're traveling with Secret Agent Clank?" Like, it kind of reminds me of like Mario and Luigi, where it's like, you know, Luigi's just as formidable, but no one pays attention to him because Mario's there. So that kind of stuff was really fun, and it definitely seemed like they kind of played into that with the larger focus on Clank in the story and in the objectives and things. And speaking of the story, I think it's actually a positive this time. It's still kind of a mess, like just going planet to planet, kind of, you know, chasing down a MacGuffin. But this being the introduction of Dr. Nefarious and kind of giving a larger roster of characters to play off of, it definitely feels like more that shared universe, like I mentioned before. And the through line of the story is a lot more satisfying. So there's a few plot twists in there that are actually really cool. You know, at one point, Clank gets replaced with an evil doppelganger. And so, like, you just play for a little while with this, like, fake Clank until, you know, the turn of, like, him letting Ratchet know that he's evil, and then you have to fight this, like, giant mech evil Clank, and it's pretty cool. And, like, Quark's on your side, but then, like, he may or may not be killed on a mission. And so you're like, well, what do we do? Like, Quark's the only one that's, like, taken down Dr. Nefarious before. And so you, like, go to chase down, like, you know, what Quark might have used to save the day before, and you find out that he's not dead, and like, there's a lot more there. And also just Dr. Nefarious is a much more interesting villain than generic Protopet number 3. So yeah, I found the cinematic presentation of it a lot more engaging, and the through line a lot more satisfying. Still, in the end, like, the final fight is actually, like, really hard, because it's got multiple phases and other combat in between the phases that can, like, really just tear through your health before you even get to the second phase. It took me a few tries to do, and was fairly difficult, but still, like, right after it ends, basically, it goes to credits. It doesn't really feel like there's any, like, resolution to the plot or anything. And maybe I'm just expecting too much from the Ratchet & Clank series. I don't know. We'll see if the PS3 era ramps it up any. Yeah, I guess I wanted a little bit more from, like a conclusion with the characters, considering this is kind of the end of a trilogy. And there aren't even, like, the kind of the interactive scenes within the credits like there was in the last one, where at least you get some resolution that plays during the credits. There's a pretty fun, like, post-credits scene. Honestly, I didn't expect. Like, I wouldn't have waited for it. I was just recording the credits to prove that I got to them, and when they ended, it went to a scene. Like, sure, it seemed like kind of a throwaway thing, but whatever. I like Dr. Nefarious, so that's fine. But yeah, this definitely felt the most like what I know of Ratchet & Clank, because, like, obviously everyone knows Dr. Nefarious is kind of the main villain, and, like, Quark and Ratchet are more friend than foe, which was kind of a weird thing in the second one, that he was, like, the villain all along. Like, I did not like that reveal. So yeah, there was a lot more to like here, but there still were some negatives. The main thing was the pacing, the way that it was just a lot more combat focused. And ironically, while I said the last one felt too long, this actually felt a little short. Like, I really enjoyed a lot of the variety, like the Quark Hollow missions and the Annihilation Nation, like, obstacle courses you could go do, many of which were optional. There was a lot of them. And, like, even those, kind of the listed missions, you would have one or two that's just, clear out the area, and then you'd have like a turret battle, and then like a hover bike or whatever it's called. But so much of the game felt focused on shooting, whereas I feel like the last ones had more kind of cool puzzle sections, and, like, there was no hover bike, or there was no hoverboard races in this one. Like, it very much felt like the Ratchet Pew Pew show. And I like all of the aspects of Ratchet & Clank, not just the shooting. Granted, there were some really cool weapons in this one. And like I said, the fact that there's, like, 5 levels of upgrades is really cool. And some of them had some super great, like, final forms. I don't know, I wanted more than just, like, a lot of shooting. Because I had all of my health full, and pretty much all of the weapons I cared about, at least, up to max level by the end. Like, it wasn't a problem to clear everything out just through normal gameplay. But I think that's because so much of it was fighting. Yeah, like, this one also had some really cool, like, visually interesting planets. Again, I don't remember their names, but, like, specifically, I loved the, like, Hollow Studios or something like that. Hollow Film Studios, I don't know. It was basically Hollywood, because you're, like, going through, like, kind of the backstage of sets, and, like, a lot of the environments are destructible because it's just, like, kind of cardboard sets and stuff like that. And it looks very visually interesting, and more importantly, it doesn't look just like the, kind of the city planet from the last game. It kind of has its own style to it. But yeah, honestly, like, my main problem with the game, like, the reason this sounds positive, but it really is negative, is that no major moments stand out to me. Like, good or bad. It's very light on gadgets. Like, there's no grind rails. I really enjoyed those sections, and they were some of my favorite ones in the last game. There's still, like, the door unlock minigames, and It's probably the best ones of the bunch, but it kind of just proves the fact that all this game is shooting, because even the door unlock minigame is like shooting viruses and collecting data, I guess, to like get you through the lock. I don't know. Again, I didn't hate that in this one. I just didn't really like want to do it anymore by the end. I don't know. Like, there were some super cool weapons, but just not a lot of like memorable moments. I enjoyed playing this one the most, but it feels like it had the least amount of like gameplay variety of this trilogy, at least. Again, even though it still had plenty. It's just weird to me, like, when something works and then they take it away for the next one. Like, I was fine that they got rid of the ship missions, but they didn't need to get rid of the hoverboard missions. They didn't need to get rid of, like, most of the gadgets. They just have to make them more, like, user-friendly, really. I liked using them. I don't really have anything else to say about this one. So, I guess, I mean, that's the end of this trilogy. I guess we'll just call it here. Like, I will be back, hopefully not too long, with the PS3 trilogy. Well, 3.5 G? But I'll be back with those in a different video. I think I'm going to do that one a little differently. I didn't really like splitting this up with like first impressions and final thoughts, because it seems to just kind of be like more explaining of the same things I touched on in the first thoughts. So I think I'm just going to take some notes about an hour in and then follow up on those notes like when I actually share my thoughts on the game. So it's just 3 sections instead of basically like 6 for the video. Should speed it up a little bit too. This was longer than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, that's all I got for this one right now. Let me know what you think of these games, and let me know how excited you are for Rift Apart, which I did not realize was coming out in June. So I gotta get going on the rest of these games, I guess. Whoops. But yeah, thanks for watching, y'all, and see you next time.